Brian Thomas Jr. is out. Ramondre Stevenson and Kayshon Boutte are also out, among many others. And those are just a couple reasons why I always wait until the end of the week to go through every matchup to find the must start and sit defenses. And defense has never been more important. Make sure you understand that. So we're going through every matchup today, finding those must start and sit defenses. And I'm one of the only creators who does defense multiple times a week on my channel. So make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now, getting into our first matchup, it's that overseas game, Atlanta versus Indianapolis. Now, everybody understands who's been here before. I do not like overseas matchups for offense in fantasy football. A lot of this year has been dominated by bad play offensively outside of one team, not one matchup. One team with the Los Angeles Rams being able to buck that trend. Well, this week, I think this could go a lot of different ways, which is why I ultimately decided, for many reasons of uncertainty, I think the Colts defense is actually a pretty solid play. The Colts defense for the majority of the season, they've done very well in fantasy. Lou Anarumo has completely changed that defense's culture over there as defensive coordinator. They already had a lot of talent, and you're just starting to see it this year for fantasy football. Like, this defense has done very well for the most part outside of a couple weeks in fantasy, and I expect that to continue this week because the Falcons offense is already one of the most inconsistent, if not the most inconsistent in the entire league. And again, overseas matchups, I just put less stock into those because a lot of times I've been proven very right. But that applies to the Colts as well offensively. And that's why I think the Falcons defense are very playable. They are not that low ranked in my rankings. And those of you with a premium subscription at FS Roundup can see where they're at right now in my defense rankings overall. This is a defense that has actually been very good in several weeks for fantasy football. And amongst all of their troubles, they're still the defense number 18 in fantasy through 8 games. They've done well in certain weeks, but they've also been atrocious in certain weeks. So I think if I combine that inconsistency with the Colts' problem, which is that Daniel Jones morphed into a werewolf last week and looked like his Daniel Jones of the New York Giants version, yeah, that's a problem. I could see it going bad overseas in this matchup. If the Falcons defense plays well, this could be a massive upside week. It's a low floor, high risk game, and it's a high upside, high ceiling game. That's what the Falcons defense is for the entirety of the season, and especially this week in the overseas game. Now, our next matchup is the Cleveland Browns at the New York Jets. And this one feels pretty obvious from the Browns standpoint. Their defense has actually done extraordinarily, like not even just like pretty good. They've done awesome for their issues offensively. The Cleveland Browns, the defense number 12 in fantasy. Like, think of how crazy that is. This is one of the worst teams in the NFL, and they've been pretty dominant in fantasy. 24 sacks through 8 games, 8 fumbles, and 6 picks. Their defense is pretty awesome. Like, that defense against the Jets, I've got no issue with the matchup, even though it's in New York. And they're both coming off bye weeks, so they both should be well rested. And maybe the Jets get Garrett Wilson back. We don't know as of the time of this filming. But the bottom line is this. The Browns pass rush will get after regardless whether it's Justin Fields or Tyrod Taylor, which we still don't know. And Aaron Glenn refuses to tell us for advantage reasons. It's so dumb. The Browns defense, though, I think is going to be a really good play this week. The Jets defense, too. Listen, I get it. They suck already, and they traded away probably their 2 best defensive players this past week in the trade deadline. But I cannot get it out of my head. I mean, how do you not see this team as a viable play this week? They're not in my top 12. They did not move up. I'm just saying, man, like, they cannot be that far down in my rankings because it's the Browns, man. If they have any sort of competency whatsoever, and it's hard to believe they do, but if they did, all they needed to do was shut down Judkins in this game. That's all you need to do as a defense. And if they choose to do it, then force Dylan Gabriel to throw and beat them, it could be a low-scoring matchup where the Jets actually hang on for a solid fantasy defensive performance. And the last thing I'll touch on with the Jets defense is there's something to the mental element of this, and their defense has been getting absolutely thrashed in the media as being terrible post-trade. So I do think there will be an encouragement and motivational aspect to the Jets' defensive play this week. I think they're playable regardless of situation because this matchup is very, very playable. The New Orleans Saints at the Carolina Panthers is our next matchup here, and the Panthers' defense is another one that I feel is relatively obvious that is a startable play this week. I picked them up in a bunch of leagues, and usually when I pick up one defense in a bunch of leagues, it's not good for fantasy football. But at the end of the day, man, like this offense, again, the Saints offense is so bad. I mean, they just traded away possibly their wide receiver one, and I know people will argue with me on that, in Rashid Shaheed. Well, now you've just got one less weapon. Kamara's been terrible, and Tyler Shough is atrocious. That guy needs another job. I mean, it's just bad. So I do think that the Panthers' defense, you've got to factor that in as a solid play. The Saints' offense already wasn't putting up many points, and they're turning the ball over too. There's no way this isn't a solid play. And then the Saints defense, they're also in this playable range for me because they're inside my teens range. And I do think that you have to factor in matchup. I get it. The Panthers are 5-4. I've been giving them a lot of credit because they deserve it. But I do still not trust the Panthers offense with Bryce Young to put up many points in this game. So I do think the Saints, from that perspective, if you're in a deep league or you don't trust my top 12 rankings, the Saints defense is one of those you could play. The New England Patriots at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is our next matchup. And the Bucs defense, I've been saying this kind of all week. I think that the Bucs are going to beat the Patriots pretty easily. I don't know, it's just a gut feeling. With Kayshon Boutte out, Ramondre Stevenson out, the Patriots haven't had their bye week. They're getting a little bit banged up and a little tired. And this is their first real opponent in a long time. And the Bucs are coming off a bye week. I do think that the Bucs defense has also, when you look at the numbers, been really good for fantasy. Like, that defense is a top 7 defense in fantasy football. They've been really solid. So I do think this one actually has a lot of potential to do pretty well if the Patriots offense doesn't move like they have been moving. But they're not in my top 12, and they're not particularly close. But the Patriots, I'm going to stay away from them. And I get it. They're still without Bucky Irving. They're still without Chris Godwin. I understand all that. But my problem with it is, again, it's their first real opponent in a long time. We haven't seen the Patriots play many good teams this year. And in some of those matchups, they haven't done as well in fantasy. So I'm going to stay away from the Patriots defense this week. But I will tell you this. Right now is the time to make sure your team is locked in, ready to go for a playoff run. And there's no better way to do that than by doing a team breakdown from me and by giving me your roster, emailing it to me either in text or picture format. You will get my full analysis on your roster and let me know if the trade deadline is passed or if it hasn't yet, and we will discuss trade ideas, waiver ideas, ways to make your team better to gear you up for this playoff run, which we need to win this year. We're getting a bunch of chips for everyone in the audience because we want to win this year. You can already access league-winning features in the premium subscription on our site with the waiver wire tool, my top 250 rankings every week, the comparison feature, the league sync-up feature, but the team breakdown is where you get personalized advice from me on what you need to do with your team to gear up for this playoff run. So make sure to go down there, use that link in the description to get your team breakdown today. Now get into our next matchup. It's the Baltimore Ravens at the Minnesota Vikings this week. And to me, the Ravens defense is still a really solid start. Like, I cannot forget J.J. McCarthy and how bad he's looked for the majority of the year. And, I sound like a J.J. hater. I kind of am, I guess, because I don't think he's that good. But, it's not because I don't like the guy. I have no problem with the guy. But, the Ravens defense, number one, looked very good last week and the previous week. They're turning it on, very similar to last year, how they had a really brutal start, and then they started to win games, and they started to look really good. The Ravens defense has looked good, and the Vikings offense, man, even in the win against the Lions last week, it seemed like they were more reliant on good defensive play and just a couple big throws from McCarthy that he was able to make. But I think if you look at Lamar's record versus the NFC, which is absolutely video game-ish, you would be inclined to believe that the Ravens are going to beat the Vikings this week. I think they're hot right now. It's an offense you want to stay away from. For that reason, I'm going to bench the Vikings defense for sure, even though they're awesome because of Brian Flores. And also, I think the Ravens defense is playable because I do think they will end up pounding the Vikings in this game. The Buffalo Bills at the Miami Dolphins is our next matchup. And I will admit, there is still something in the back of my head that makes me think that, man, what if this matchup doesn't go how I think it could go? Because Buffalo dominates the Dolphins historically in this matchup with Josh Allen. But there is still something. The Dolphins can usually put up more points when it's in Miami against the Buffalo Bills. And they are in this position right now to where they're coming off a mini bye week too. So they do have things at their advantage. That's the only reason I'm like, where do I actually want to rank the Bills? But even after revisiting these rankings today, this morning, I did not move the Bills. They're still in must-start territory. Their defense has actually looked pretty good the last several weeks, and it's just a matchup I like. I mean, ultimately, Miami's offense is not that good, and their team is just in disaster mode right now because their head coach, they already know, is a ticking time bomb. So I'm going to stay away from the Dolphins' defense because the Bills' offense is not one you want to mess with, and I'm going to go ahead and play the Bills' defense because the Dolphins' offense, in contrast, is one you want to play against. The New York Giants at the Chicago Bears. This one's a tricky one. I will say this is probably one of the trickiest matchups for me this week because the Bears defense hasn't been that good, but the Giants offense actually has been okay because Jackson Dart has been pretty awesome this year. But the reason I still think the Bears are a solid play, and one that's like right on the border of my top 12, is because of the fact that the Bears defense is going up against a team with minimal options. They've got nothing in New York. They don't have any weaponry, any playmakers outside of Dart. So Dart is forced to make a lot of plays with this offense. And against the Bears defense, I think they could put up 20. But the thing I like about the Bears situation this week is the Giants, they get in a hole, and if the Bears offense is doing good, they'll get in a hole, and then they'll start to turn the ball over, and they'll give up sacks. So that's why I like the Bears defense this week from a fantasy perspective, enough to have them as a playable flex defense. And the Giants defense, I'm not going to mess with the Bears offense. Like, that is just too good of an offense. When they're on, they can put up a lot of points like they did last week. And the Giants defense hasn't looked as good as I thought it would this year. The Jacksonville Jaguars at the Houston Texans is our next matchup. Houston's defense is one of the elites. I've said this throughout the week. Broncos defense, Seahawks defense, Texans defense. Those are our three elite defenses in fantasy football this year and in NFL football. So against most matchups, I like it, especially when it's in Houston. That's a tough place to play. And we've been highlighting it the past several weeks when they've been able to beat a lot of teams like the 49ers, and they were very close to beating the Broncos. This is a really solid defense, man. They are excellent at turning the ball over. They're vicious at the point of attack. They absolutely scare the crap out of any opposing quarterback. And Trevor Lawrence, if you recall, has nightmares from playing the Houston Texans defense. I'm going to play the Texans defense with full confidence. And this week, the Jags defense is very viable. They do not have CJ Stroud to worry about. And, the irony is I'm a big Stroud defender. I actually don't think there's that big of a difference between him and Davis Mills, because the bottom line is, offensive line-wise, they're both under duress constantly, and neither one of them are that mobile and able to throw on the run. So it's kind of even Steven from a matchup perspective from the quarterback, optic, because I just think that the Jags defense, if they can apply any pressure, like any team has been able to do against Houston this year, they will come out with a solid fantasy day by getting turnovers or a couple of sacks. So I do think the Jags defense is very playable. The Arizona Cardinals at the Seattle Seahawks. I will tell you, from a defensive perspective, again, the Seahawks defense is elite. You play them. I will say, couple things make me wonder, because division games, they are scary. I don't love divisional matchups for fantasy football. Seahawks defense is elite, though, so I'm going to say that they're a must-start defense. And I will say this, the Cardinals offense and the defense actually look pretty good. Kyler Murray being out of that lineup has really opened up my eyes to realize problem was not coaching. Problem was not defense. Problem was they did not have a quarterback that they felt and they believed in as their guy. And that has changed with Jacoby Brissett. They believe in him more than Kyler Murray, and it has energized both sides of the ball. And for that reason, I, for a split second, contemplated putting the Cardinals in playable territory / flex territory, but I didn't do it because the Seahawks offenses look too good for me to overlook, and the Cardinals defense hasn't been good enough and consistent enough in fantasy for me to take that leap yet. But I will say they are on notice, and they are absolutely a defense I'm going to keep my eye on moving forward for future fantasy success. The Detroit Lions at the Washington Commanders. This could have been what could have been, right? I mean, Jaden Daniels, if he was healthy this year, this would have been an awesome matchup, but it is, of course, no longer viable. It's an old team, old roster without their star quarterback. Detroit's defense is very, very much a top 3 defense for me still, even though they're inconsistent and they're injured too. This matchup, Detroit Lions off of a loss like that, I want in on the Lions defense, and I want nothing to do with the Commanders defense. The Los Angeles Rams at the San Francisco 49ers is our next matchup. The Rams defense is very good. However, if you looked at the first opportunity this year versus the 49ers in Los Angeles, by the way, it was not a good day for their defense for fantasy football. Mac Jones ripped that defense to shreds. And I think the reason they're still playable is because the Rams their defensive front is just better than the 49ers offensive line. So I do think they'll apply more pressure this week to Mac Jones than they did the first time around because they're even more unhealthy than they were the first time they played. And I do think that Mac Jones can make mistakes, and he probably will in this game. I think the 49ers defense is still a top 12 play for me this week. And the 49ers defense, when you throw guys like you and me out there, they're throwing average Joes and Canadian Football League players out there. You just want nothing to do with this defense against an offense like this with Puka Nacua playing, with Devontae Adams playing, Kyron Williams playing, Matt Stafford playing at an MVP level. Get me away from this type of offense and bench that defense. The Pittsburgh Steelers at the Los Angeles Chargers, our Sunday night game, and I've been on this one all week. I think that the Chargers are going to actually pretty handily beat down the Pittsburgh Steelers in this matchup. Pittsburgh on the road in West Coast games, not a good equation. Like, they go travel to the West Coast across the country. It's not a good day, usually historically, especially with Mike Tomlin. I do not like the Pittsburgh Steelers defense this week because the Chargers, their playmakers are still very healthy and they're still very viable, particularly in the passing game. And I think that in a nutshell, in a vacuum, yes, the Steelers could apply pressure to Justin Herbert in this game because they're missing Joe Alt, and TJ Watt finally found a groove last week, and so did Alex Highsmith, and so did Cam Hayward. I get all that, but the Steelers' defense has been very inconsistent, and I do not trust them in this spot. I do not want to play the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, and the Chargers defense, I still like playing them. The Chargers defense against Aaron Rodgers actually has been good this year, but again, I think of this game as very similar to that Packers game on Sunday Night Football. I think the Chargers defense will probably just get the Steelers offense into a hole because their offense will score a lot of points and the Steelers won't be able to keep up. That's when you see mistakes from Rodgers. So I think the Chargers are a good play and the Steelers are not. And our last matchup of the week, the Monday night game, Philadelphia at Green Bay. That's another tricky one. Honestly, I could see this game going a lot of different ways. These two teams have been very inconsistent offensively and defensively this year. It's a very tricky one to figure out. I'm going to lean with the Eagles probably winning this game because the Packers are so inconsistent. I mean, the Eagles are too, but the reason I like it is because of historical success of the Eagles in the past couple of seasons against the Packers. So I'm going to bench the Packers defense and just kind of assume that Saquon Barkley has a good day and maybe Jalen Hurts gets a couple touchdowns as well. And then the Eagles defense, I'm going to play them in some circumstances because I do think that in 18-man leagues, 16-man leagues, they're viable because Jordan Love is a turnover guy when he gets into a hole or under pressure. And I think the Eagles defense, with the addition of Jalen Phillips to that front seven, I think could get after Jordan Love in this game. So let me know what your situation looks like on defense for week 10. And if you want to see the full top 12 defense rankings on the week, click on this video right here.